All right, welcome back. We are COMP1011, that's Advanced OOP with Java, in the summer 2022 semester at Georgian College, and it's week 8, part 2 of our broadcast and recording together. And in this part, we're going to talk about a couple things that we didn't talk about in the first part, which are streams and how to use the file chooser. Okay, that's kind of what I want to focus on today. So what we did over the break, just 2 seconds, is what's due, let's put what's due here, is ICE 7. It's due Sunday, July 10th, 2022, right at midnight, this Sunday at midnight. Okay, ICE 7. And then for this one only, no lab report required. So it'd be nice, a quick and easy one to do. So that way there's no, as long as you do your other stuff, then you're good to go. So that's what we did over the break. That's up and running now, up on Blackboard, no problem. And we've covered pretty much all of this. But what I want to do is I want to talk about streams and I want to talk about that file chooser. But first, let's do the file chooser. So here inside of this piece, right, there's a couple things that we can do, right, to make it a little better than what this is doing right here. So I want to select the file. Okay, so there's another button that I want. Right now I have save to file, read from file, and I want to make just another button so we don't just kind of mess this up. And it's going to be, kind of select file. Let's do that. So again, I want to get another button and I want to put it in on this, but I want to move this around so that it's here. And this button is going to be the select file button, select file button. There it is. And this is going to be select file button clicked. That's going to be the action. Okay, maybe we can actually rename this select file. Select file, there it is. I think what I also need to do, I want to get a text area. So if I scroll down, I want to grab this text area and I want to put it in here. So text area, that's going to go here in the middle, in the center, right? So the text area is where we're going to show the file information. And in the code area here, under code, under FXID, right, for the text area, we want to call this thing something like text area. Okay. And so the text property is going to be something that's going to give us some information. We're going to say something like select file is what this is going to say. Okay. And I think this is going to be pretty good. So this is where we're going to put the select file, is what's going to happen here. I'm going to click wrap text, right? And again, what wrap text will do is any long lines or anything like that will wrap to the next line. That's what it does, right? And that's kind of the first bit that I want. Okay, so this is the first part. I'm just modifying our design a little bit. In the view, I want to go to show sample controller skeleton. And what I want to do is I want to grab this last piece right here and, this piece, this text area, part 2, I want to be able to access that. So there's a couple things we need. We have a read from file button. a Save To File button, a Select File button, and a text area. Let's grab these two FXML pieces, go back into IntelliJ, and inside of our FileChooser controller, then what I want to do is in here, I want to put those pieces in there. Text area needs Alt-Enter, where we import the class for the text area. And I think we don't have the Save button file. We're going to grab that too. I forgot to add that in. Save to, well, read to file button. There we go. Grab that. I just never did that, so we'll just put that in there. So we have a reference to it if we want to change our values in the read from button file. There we go. Okay, so that's these things. So save file, save to file button clicked, read from file button clicked. And then what I want to do is I want to grab the select file button clicked, that one, the last bit. And I'm just going to program that at the bottom here. There it is. There's my select file button clicked. So you want to set up a file chooser. That's what you want to be able to do, right? And what a file chooser does is it puts up this a dialog box that comes up and allows us to choose our file. That's what it kind of does for us. Okay, so that's what a file chooser does. So what we want to kind of do is think about how this is going to be done. So whenever I click the select file button, let's think about how this is going to be done. So first of all, I want to instantiate, or let's configure a dialog, basically a dialog window. Dialog is a special window. It's a modal window. Modal means that you need to press OK cancel. Okay, if you don't press OK cancel, then it won't go away. That's what a modal window does. And allowing, kind of the selection of a file. So I want to select the file. This is the path of the file that I want to select. And we're going to use FileChooser. There's our FileChooser. And we're going to call this just FileChooser, just to be clear. Alt-Enter to enter this information, just like normal. So there's our FileChooser object. That's what it does. And I'm going to say FileChooser dot set title. So we're going to set the title for the FileChooser window. So it says select file, and that's our window. So when the window gets created, it's going to basically say something like, "Hey, here's our file to select." Okay. Then what we want to do is we want to display files in the folder from which the app was launched. Okay, so that's something that we want to do. And we're going to say FileChooser dot set initial directory to a new file dot. Okay, so file again, enter, import the class. So we have that. That's the path name. Dot means the same folder as where we are right now. Okay, so that's the initial directory. We then, after we've done some configuration, we want to then display the FileChooser itself, FileChooser, and that's the FileChooser dialog, right? That's what we want to do. And we're going to say basically file, we're going to make a new file, which is equal to the FileChooser dot show open dialog. So show open dialog. There's different kinds of dialogs. One of them is a open file, and the other one is a save file. Open file dialog, save file dialog. By the way, it's very similar to C#. If you've ever done any Windows programming with C#, it's almost exactly the same. So show open dialog. And what this does is I want to talk about in the border pane itself, right? we want to access the border pane, right, that we have, because that's part of our layout. And if you look here, in the layout, we don't really have, kind of this object, and we never really selected the border pane itself. We want to have access to the border pane so we can kind of open the file dialog and place it in there. Okay, so that's something that we're missing. Okay, so let's pause here for a second and let's just comment this out. Just 1 sec. Okay. And what I want to do is let's go back to FXML or to Scene Builder. And what I want to do is in the border pane itself, let's give a name for the border pane so we have access to it. Because if we don't, then it's just going to be more challenging. Okay, so here's our border pane, and I'm just going to go here, and we're going to go here, and we're just going to call this border pane, like lowercase border pane, border pane. So we're kind of naming it border pane. Save. And again, what I want to do is go to View, Show Sample Controller, and I want to grab that border pane right here. This is it right here. And I'm going to add this into our FXML document. So go back to here and kind of scroll up. And I just want to put the border pane kind of up here somewhere. There it is. It's going to ask me to import the class, which we're going to do with an Alt-Enter. And now we have access to that border pane. Okay, so we have access to the container that holds the entire content of our file. That's what we're doing there. So if I scroll down here, let's go back to this. So I want to say FileChooser show open dialog. And what I want to do is I want to say, okay, I want to look at the border pane, and I want to get the scene itself, the scene from the border pane itself. And I want to get my window from the scene. This is another hack to get the information. And that is where my show open dialog is going to appear, inside of this window. So this function gets the window that we've just created, and that is where the show open dialog is going to pop on top of. Okay, so border pane was just a trick for us to be able to get access to the window object. Okay, that's what we wanted to do. All right, so that is what it does. And what's the next step? So the next step will be, so we want to process the selected path somehow, right? And or display a message. That's what we want to do. And we're going to say if the file is not equal to null. So if it's not so it's something that we've selected. If the file, because it's going to give us an object for this, then I want to be able to kind of analyze the path to see, kind of what this is, right? So I want to analyze the path here, and I want to create that file itself. Otherwise, so I'm going to use that file. Otherwise, we're going to come back here in a second. I want to use the text area, and I want to set text in the text area that basically says select file. Okay, so just like we had before. That's what the select thing is going to be. Okay. But what we need is some kind of the ability for us to, to get the file information. That's what we want to be able to do. And what we basically want to do is, if I have the path information, right? That's the path that I'm getting from the file. Let's do this. So again, if my file that I've selected is not equal to null, what do I want to do with this file? I want to be able to set the file name up here, this file name here, to the file that I've selected. So let's think about how this is going to work. So if the file is not equal to null, then I want to get that. Let's output that. So I'll do a system for now .out.println so we can see what that is. and I want to get that file, kind of thing. And I want to, now notice what it says. So the file itself is some information, but I want to use the name of the file, whatever the file is. I want to output it to kind of the, out here. And that's really what I want to be able to do. I want to get that file, whatever that file name is, and that's the one that I want to use here in my vector 2D instead of doing that. But remember, these things are not connected in any way, right? They're not connected in any way at all. So we got to consider what those things are. Okay. So let's try this out. Let's see if this works. So we're going to press play, and if everything goes well, if I click that open dialog, if I select file, then it's should bring up a dialog that looks like this. This is very similar to what we've seen before. And I want to select my vector2d.txt and press open. And notice that vector2d.txt comes up. Isn't that beautiful? So that's what my select file does. That's the open file dialog. So if I click that open again, I can click something else and press open, and it's going to output whatever file I selected. That's all this does. It kind of opens up. It says select file. That's what the window, we told it what to say, select file. And we can also notice that file name, there's no file name that's here at all. And what we can do, right, we can configure it even more than this, because right now it doesn't give us a lot of information. But kind of neat, right? Where we can open stuff up with this little interface, right? Okay, what if I press cancel? If I press cancel, then we can write in here whatever we want, right, as an example. And what I want to be able to do is use that file information, kind of in here. So let's think about how we're going to use this. So, okay, so I want thoughts from you guys. Now I'm able to get the file name, okay? We can also do other things, not just set title. Let's see what else we can do here. So if I do something like, hey, FileChooser, I want to, look at this, set initial directory. I can get initial file name, right? So that's something we can do. I can show the open dialog, which we've done before, right? I can get extension filters. I can get the title, right? And I can also set the initial file name. So that's the initial, let's do that. So let's set the initial file name to what we want, which is our vector2d.txt. Let's say if I want this, selected file name, set initial file name, and if I did this and press play, and then if I choose select file, right, and then I click this right here, let's try that again. So select file, then we should see, if I click open, I was hoping that it would show me that default file, okay, but it doesn't. All right, so that's something that we have to do. Let's see if we put it in the wrong order. Sometimes what happens is, we set the initial file name to something, but it kind of didn't do anything. Let's make so that when we have the initial directory, this is cool, and we open up the file, is there something that we can do after we open up the file? Can we do this after can we do something with FileChooser after we open it up? Will it do anything? So if I press this play and kind of do it in a different order, is this going to do anything for us at all? So select file name, and then nope, doesn't do anything, right? But we want to be able to configure it so that it opens up with some detail, right? So this is what we want. This is the configuration that we want. We want to set the initial file name to whatever we want. What else can we do with FileChooser? FileChooser, let's take a look. Just using the lookup, which is what this is. We can, if I do set, then these are the things we can do. We can set title, set initial file name, set initial directory, set selected extension filter, right? So if I did that, extension filter, then that would be the filter that we're looking for. So maybe I'm only looking for, something that I want to look at. So if I say something like extension filter, FileChooser extension filter, right? I want to think about how this is going to look. A lot of times the documentation is pretty simple, right? So if I go something like this, and I want to be able to think about, what file, what the extension is going to be. For example, if I want to only have the txt extension, right? So how do I use just the txt extensions? I'm only looking at filtering it so that I can only see txt files. All the other files, because it's a text file that I'm looking at, are superfluous. They're the wrong file. It's going to cause us to have an error, right? We don't want that to happen. So how do I do that? So how do I set the file extension, if you will? Okay, because that's something that I need to do. So let's go and look it up. So again, if I wanted to do that, I want to say something like FileChooser extension filter, right? And if I look at the FileChooser information, right, we might get a some information about the extension filter that I want. Okay, so a new extension. So here's what it looks like. Take a look. So extension filter, it takes a description and then a list of extensions, a string list of extensions. That's one of the constructors. And the other one is a string descriptor with a string of extensions. Okay, so that's what it looks like. And it'd be nice if we had an example that we could follow to make this go, right? So that's kind of what we look at. So that's the constructor for FileChooser extension filter. Okay, so let's go back and we'll say, here it is, JavaFX FileChooser for Stack Overflow. Sure, we'll use that for a second. And there it is, FileChooser extension filter is equal to a new extension filter. And then what we want to do, that's definitely a way of doing it. But this is kind of what we want to do. See text files like this. And sure, we'll just copy paste. Why not? But the chooser itself, that is the chooser that we're going to use, right? And we're just going to grab these two lines of code. I'll put these in the chat for you so that you have what I have instead of trying to look up this kind of stuff. There it is. Let's see if this actually works, just like, you know, kind of copy paste. So I'll go back to this. And so we're going to set up the extension filter ahead of time. So we're just going to copy paste in there. There is no chooser. It's called FileChooser, which is this. And what we want to say is we only care about extensions that look like that, something with a txt file. Okay, so this is the friendly string that we're going to show the user. And this is us configuring the extension filter to have this. Maybe this is the way we set the initial file name too. All right, let's save that and go. Again, this is just using some intuition when we're programming, right? So select, and it worked. Yeah, look at that. So this is your selection filter that we can have here, and that's only for txt files. So everything else is filtered out, so we don't see anything here, just these two files, which reduces error for us when it comes to looking at files, because all we care about is text files. Okay, cool. So maybe there's the same way, just like we did the FileChooser extension filter. It's just going to show you this. We can also have other kinds of files. So for example, remember that is one. Well, we can have multiple. We don't have to just have this one. We can have all files. We can select. Remember, it's a pull down. So if I was to run this thing again, right, it's just like in here. What we want to do is if I click select filter, then I want to be able to kind of select all. I want to look at all files. Or there might be another filter in here as well, okay? File name, notice that I can, kind of select the last thing I selected, vector 2D. And then if I press cancel, it doesn't do anything. If I press open, it actually it saves that information. Okay, cool. It doesn't save the directory though. So that's one thing that we have to, be cognizant of, that it won't save the directory of this thing. But what about this initial file name? So what if I said something like, get initial file name, and then I want to, so we can get the initial file name, whatever that is, but maybe there's a way of, just like we did before, I want to set the initial file name of this thing altogether, so that way it's going to set the initial file name to a specific object, a specific string, as opposed to something else. For now, let's just take initial file name out because it's not working, and we can look that up as well. So what if I wanted to have more than one extension filter? Let's do that next. So go back to here, and you can see that here what it's doing is it's got the extension filter, and then here is the FileChooser open dialog, and this is exactly kind of how we worked it out. But I want to have multiple extension filters, and here you can see that it does exactly that, where we have web pages, comma, whatever, comma, whatever, and it does, you know, kind of this kind of stuff in an order that we want, right? So different kinds of filters that we want here as well. So not just text files, but what if I wanted all files? So I wanted more than one filter. Okay, so let's go back to the order of things. So here's our FileChooser and JavaFX 11. Maybe there is another one. And notice that it says add all, and we can have multiple things here. Like for example, all files. Here's an extension filter for all files. So copy this one. And if I go back to this one, so it says new extension filter, instead of add, which is, you know, what we've done here, right? Then we can, where it says get extension filters.add, instead of making a brand new extension filter that is like this, we can make an anonymous extension filter this way, okay, which is kind of cool. I like this way maybe even more than making another object, because really we're never going to use this extension filter again, right? So let's do that instead. So we'll say add all, and then instead of extension filter like this, we'll make it a list of things we want to add, and we want to do something like this, new extension filter for this one. So this is text files. So this is what we want in there. So this is the new extension filter. So we'll import that class instead. There it is. So this is kind of like this one, FileChooser extension filter. There it is, new FileChooser extension filter for this text files. But we'll grab this nice text that they gave us. Okay, so this is kind of a little bit nicer than what we had before. And then what we can do is we can add in more. So we don't need this one anymore. Let's get rid of that. So this is kind of cool. And let's grab the next one. I want to have all files. And the reason why this is good is because you can create a pull down list. So this is all files. And of course, the pattern is star.star, right? So everything. And that's what this would be, star.star, right? And we don't need this. So that gives us a list of extension filters that we're going to use. And let's see if I'm right. So select. And now we can pull down all files or only text files, right? Pretty cool. Awesome. All right. But what about that funky open button? Open, what it's going to do is it's going to open up that button. It's going to read right from that, from that file altogether, right? So that's what the FileChooser does, right? It allows us to select a file to read from, right? That's what it does. But remember, we have it, it's incoming right here. This is the file name where it's coming from. And what I want to do is I want to take that file and I want to use that file name by default, right, when I select it. So it'd be nice if at the top we had some kind of public, kind of method, some kind of other thing that had nothing to do with fxml. Maybe we've done this before in previous controllers, where I kind of say something like, I want a private, this is a file path, if you will, for my my file location, right? That's what this thing is. So notice that my file is here. This is the file to save and the file to load, right? So this is kind of my active file. We'll call this active file. And the active file is, of course, a string type. So active file. and we'll make it so that the default is this vector2d dot text. That'll be the txt. So that'll be the file, right? So vector2d.txt, okay? And active file is something that I want to modify. This active file, I want to modify this thing, and I want to use this active file here instead of my hard-coded name. So active file, right? And I want to do the same thing here, active file, whatever the active file is, right? And if you really want to call this, we can call this the active file path or whatever you want, right? So we'll call this the active, let's rename. So again, refactor, rename. Let's try do this properly this time. Active file path. There we go. Active file path. There's our active file path for our save to file button. And there's our active file path from read file button clicked. And what we want to do is when we select our file with our select file button clicked event, then what we want to do is we want to take this file.getName and set that to the active file path. So we're going to say active file path is equal to this file.getFileName. Okay? And that will be basically what we're going to do. We're going to click that button, and then that's going to enable us to do kind of the things that we want to do. Okay? All right, so let's do that. So if I run it, and again, this is the first iteration of our little open dialog box. So I click select file, and I want to click this one and press open. And then if I read from file, we get that file. That's good to go. But what if I want to read from the other one? I select file path, and I click the old one, press open, and then click read from file. And well, we should have a different order of things. There it is, right? There's the different order. Notice that, yes, it is different order because we have 1020 instead of 1 minus 1. So that is the thing. So we've actually been successful in doing that. So read from file and save to file. We're not actually showing it here, and that's kind of a next step that we could do. We can actually show our data here inside of of a table, because remember, once we've read everything in, we have data. We have data. So let's go back to that for a second. So good. And so we have our FileChooser example. Let's put that up on GitHub. Questions around this? So git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say implemented simple FileChooser, right? And git push. You may need to do this in the future. That's why I'm getting you to do it now with me. All right, excellent. So save to file button, and just make sure nothing's going on YouTube. No, we're still good. Any questions around this at all? Questions, concerns? Would you do differently? One thing to note is, I want to point this out too, that we're using an open file dialog, right? So when I click this, it says open, but we're not actually opening anything. When I click open, we're not responding to this open event. The only thing we're really doing with the open event here, we're not filling in any data, right? We're not doing that. We're waiting for me to read from file or save to file. That's all we're doing, right? So what if I created my own file name? Does that work? So let's try that now. So let's say, for example, I want to create my own file name. It doesn't exist here, right? And I want to call it something like a file that doesn't exist, right? Let's say, for example, vector2d new.txt, and then click open. Well, it says vector2d new.txt is not found, right? So this is something different than what we would have if we were using the save file dialog. So this is select file. And when we think about these buttons, save to file and read from file, this is like open file, and this is like save to file, right? So that's what I want to think. So this is kind of like a file open and file save, okay? Interesting. Okay, there's our save to file button clicked event. That's cool, it's an event. We try and we do all this kind of stuff to get it open. And okay, what if, I'm just going to go back to our design. What if we change the name of this to open and the other one save? Okay, what if we try to do that? Save and open. Okay, so this one, this button, let's rename the properties of this thing to open file dialog, open file, open file. There it is. And remember that we already have this thing that says select file button. And that's fine. What I want to do is rename this thing. So instead of select file button, we want to make it so that it is open file button. So open file button clicked. We're also going to call this the open file button. How's this going to mess us up, guys? Open. What if you wanted to make a change like this? How would you set this up? So that's the open file. I don't need this one anymore. So read from file is going to be gone. So let's, okay, cancel. Let us go to read from file and delete it. It says delete that component. Yes, we do. And instead of save to file, we'll just say save file, open file, save file. So we'll just rename this to save file button. So I'm going to change this to, because sometimes people ask me about these questions too. And then save file button clicked. Okay, so that's the new thing it's going to be called. Open file and save to file, open file, save to file. So that's kind of almost like an open and save button. And maybe this will be called just save file. Save file. There we go. Save file, open file. Nice. So 2 buttons. And they're going to have, both of them are going to have events now. Okay. But we have some difference in naming conventions. Open file button, save file button, and open file button. Let's go back here. Open file button clicked and save file button clicked. The open file button and the save file button. So save this. And then now we need to update this stuff. So instead of a read from file button, this is an open file button. Open file button. This is a save file button. Save file button. There is no more select button, so let's get rid of that. No more of that. This is a way of doing it, right? And then the select file button click is open file button clicked. Open file button clicked. There we go. That's kind of, see how that lit up? Because that's connected. And we want a new one. Let's make a new one altogether, right? Which is, I'll say at fxml. And we'll do kind of the same structure. So void and then save file button clicked. And we'll say this is an action event. And then it needs to be an event like so. See how that lit up? It means this is connected. And what I want to do is I want to convert these 2 functions, instead of making them fxml functions, right, like so. Let's not make it fxml functions or active event functions. Let's take this action event stuff out. So save to file. We'll call this save to file. No button clicked. We'll keep these functions, right? Because we don't have to rewrite stuff, right? And we don't need this as fxml. So I'm showing you stuff you can do. And then read from file. We can just keep this and get rid of the event because it's not anymore an event handler anymore. So no more action event. So it'll do that. Okay, read from file. This is read from file. This is save to file. Those are the buttons we had set up before. This is the open file button clicked. This is the save file button clicked. And I want to have the exact same structure here, but instead of a file chooser with a open dialog box, I want to have a file chooser with a save file dialog box. So let's do this first. So copy this. Lots of stuff to copy. And it says duplicated code fragment. Yes, it is. But instead of select file here, it'll say open file, and this will say save file. And the initial directory is going to be the same for now. And instead of the show open dialog, we're going to show the show save dialog so we can see the difference. That's why I wanted to do that for you. And in here where we do active file path is equal to this, okay, that's fine. But what we want to do is call the read file from this one. So read from file, there it is, read from file. Read from file, all it does is outputs to the console right now. Doesn't do anything. And down here, this is save to file. So save to file. There we go. Save to file. We change the path and we save to file. Okay, that's how it goes. And this will be save file. Select file name to save. And this will say select file name to open. Okay, so that does. So very similar. Open file button clicked. Save file, but the other one has a show save file dialog with some same extensions. And let's see if this makes any difference with what we're doing here. So run it. If I click open file dialog, right, we can see that if I click vector2d and press open, then we read like normal. That's in one blow. And if I click save file dialog, it'll bring up the save file, right? And what if I want to change the name of the file? So I want to say vector2d new.txt. There it is. And I click save, then it should save it in a new file. Let's see if that worked. And to check that, we should have a new. Look at that. So there's the new file. So it actually did writing to a new file where we did it, open an old file. We can do that. And that's pretty cool. What are your thoughts there? So that is the file dialog where we had a FileChooser controller. We have two, a save file button clicked, almost identical to a open file button clicked. Okay. The only difference is this. The only difference is that. So here's something. And I want to save code, right? I'm always looking to save code. It's identical. Everything is identical. There's no difference between one thing and the other thing. The only thing we want to make a change maybe is in this set initial directory. What about if it's FileChooser.set initial file name? Maybe it applies to this, where I say that this is the vector2d.txt. Let's see what happens if I press the save button to save over it. So I press open here, right? So it doesn't really work with file opening, but maybe it works with file saving. And sure it does. There it is. That's the context. You can certainly see that you can see all files. So I can write over a file that exists, right? But it also recommends a file for you, but you can also change the name to whatever you want or cancel, okay, which is pretty cool. All right, excellent. I like it. I like it a lot. Now, how can we reduce some of this noise? Because this is open file, and that's fine. Everything is exactly the same otherwise, right? And this is a file type we want to have. File is the FileChooser show open dialog, and we want to kind of have access to this object, and we want to change the type that it's going to be every single time, but this would be the exact same, right? Is there something we can do? What do you recommend to use kind of a function that can do this for us? Maybe like a file dialog, which is what this is, right? So I want to kind of like show file dialog or configure file dialog or whatever you want to call it. When I click open file button, open file button clicked, I'm going to call the open file dialog, right? Or file dialog, whatever it's going to be. And depending on which one I checked, if I chose open file button clicked, or if I chose save file button clicked, I'm not going to replicate all this code. Can you make a recommendation here before we go on to streams? What are your thoughts, guys? How do I code this? So again, the name would be good to start with. So something like void, and I want to, it's going to do something. So that's why it's going to be kind of a method, right? And remember that we can also choose private and public for methods. This is really a private method, right? And so is this one, because these are kind of inside of our controller, right? And so would this one. This would be a private method as well. By default, Java is public, right? It's different than in C# where it's private by default. So private void, and we want to say, kind of show file dialog. And we want to kind of, whenever we call the show file dialog method, we want to choose what dialog it's going to be, open, right, or save. So those are the two different ones, right? So this is kind of we can kind of either create an enumeration, right, for this, an enum. That is something we can do, open or close. So show file log, we can make a brand new file. Let's just do this really quickly. So I want to make a new Java class, which is an enumeration, right? So how do I do an enumeration again? Remember? So we want an enum. That's what we want. And I want to call this enum, file dialog type. File dialog type, right? And then in the enum, which is here, I can enumerate which one it's going to be, where it's an open or a save. Those are the two dialog types, an open or a save. Okay, so again, I'm making an enum, file dialog type, right? It's going to be a separate file. And then inside, this is just to make it convenient so we don't put in a string option. And then in the FileChooser controller in here, I'm going to also request that the show file dialog method also indicates a file dialog type. So file dialog type is going to be called type. Okay, that's required. And then we're going to do a switch case, right, on type, where case open, then do something, and case save, then do something else. That's kind of the way we can do it. All right, those are the two cases. All right, so that's kind of what we want to do. So open and save. And what we want to do is set up some of this stuff ahead of time. So let's grab an example from one of them. Let's grab all this. So I'm going to grab one. And I'm going to go here and start populating in the show file dialog, all this stuff, the same stuff. Here's the same stuff we had before. So FileChooser is going to be the exact same. Set title. Okay, that is going to be unique, right? So that is not going to be here. It's actually going to be inside of our switch case. So in our switch case, we want to change the title instead of open file, to save file. So this is where this is going to be save file. Okay, so open file, save file. That's the first thing. The title is going to change. Okay, and that means we don't have to do it up here. So sorry, up here. The extension will be the same. This will be the exact same. The initial directory will be the same. Now this is going to be different, but we need to use file all over the place. So what I want to do is, what if we set initially file, I'm just going to copy paste this whole line here for a second. And I'm going to put this in here. Come on. Right. What if I said file is equal to this, the open dialog, and then I'm just going to copy paste that. I'll come back and fix that in a second. And then file is going to be equal to the show save dialog. There it is. So there's the difference between one and the other. Those are the two changes we're making, open file or save file. So the window is going to show something different. And the other thing we need to know is that we don't care about the initial file name unless we're saving. So we can grab that and put that in our switch case. So we'll say set title and file name would be this by default. And then up here where we have our file, we don't need to do one of these. What if we set this to null initially? So we say, okay, so this is equal to null. And before we actually get to the next part, I'm going to grab the switch case here. So I'm going to move it into where it's supposed to be. I'll put that here. So I'll switch case on type, right? On type. Initially, it'll be null. And the default case, if it's not one of these somehow, it's not going to be null because guess what? We're going to select what that file is going to be depending on the type that we're going to get from the show file dialog. So here's the initial configuration. We're going to continue to configure. We needed to do this because it needs to be used down here, right? This is where it needs to be used. And this is really the kind of a little text area that we're going to modify. I mean, we could, again, put something up here like a message to say to the text area message, which if we really want to, we could set up here. So we can say something like string text area message. We initialize it to nothing initially, so there's no message. And the text area message we can configure here. So we can say that the text area message is equal to open file. And the text area message down here is going to be save file. And then we don't need the set text. We can just say text area message, so it's not hard coded again. Wonderful. So that is our thing. Now here's something also. Read from file is something that's always going to be called. And we want to be able to process this stuff individually. So the else part is the text area message that we want to use. And I'm wondering if we even need that, just looking back at what we did. You know what? I probably don't need to do that. Probably thinking we can probably get rid of this. But we do need in the switch case something like this. We do need this part. So let's put that in. So there's going to be some duplication, but it's not going to be as much. So this is this part, and this is this part. So if else, the file name is this. So depending on if the file is not null, we need to check we always need to check that. And then we can read from file here, and we can save to file here. So save to file there. There we go. Save to file. Read from file. Text area message is going to be open file. We'll go back to that. I think that might just save us a little variable, which will look like this. And same thing with there. So we can kind of do one of these. Okay, good. Excelente. And that's our little switch case, which is nice. And that is our little show file dialog method that we just wrote. And what we want to do here is, instead of all of this, we don't want any of this stuff anymore. We can just simplify all of this work to something like show file dialog, and then we want to specify the type. So we want to say file dialog type open. And we can do the same thing here. We can say, let's get rid of all this stuff. Right? And we can say, show file dialog type save. Isn't that awesome? And that gives us more control over what we're doing. So these are the events, but it's actually using this little show file dialog function. And the show file dialog function is using either read from file or save to file, depending on what we're doing. What do you think of that? Better? Let's see if it works, first of all. I like it, but who knows if it's even going to work. So again, open file dialog. It worked. We can select a file to open. Let's say this one, old. And it's going to show us the old system. There it is. I can also save file dialog. We'll make a brand new file. Vector2D. We'll call this brand new .txt. And then if I open file dialog and I go to, I can see it brand new is there. And if I click open, then you're going to see that further down, we have a new way of doing things with the sorted order, right? That's the way we did it just now. So pretty cool. And that we did that with these little things. It's our custom show file dialog method, which is right here inside of a controller. Okay. Thoughts before I'm going to put this up on GitHub. So terminal, and then we'll talk briefly about streams. Git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say added. We'll say refactored file dialogs. What are your thoughts? Good, bad, ugly? Would you do it differently than me? What are your thoughts? And I'm saying this because we're playing around with code a little bit, but I want to recap the stuff that we've done in a bit. Okay. Hopefully you guys are okay with that. So yeah. A couple things of note. The next section, which I wanted to talk about really briefly, was streams. And I want you to think about streams as a wrapper. I know we're at the end of the day today too, and we're running a little bit overtime. But I want you to think about streams as a wrapper on top of the wraps, the kind of data. It doesn't store data in any way, okay? And it's not a data structure. Streams are basically what allows us to do a series of operations that kind of look like this, okay? So we have a data source, we build some kind of operation, and then we do a bunch of intermediate operations or middle operations, little functions we're going to do. We might have a terminal operation, a final operation, and then we get the result. That's kind of how the stream pipeline works. And the stream pipeline converts our SQL queries and other kinds of queries. We can actually use kind of a query language with functions, a functional query language, as opposed to a string-based query language, which is actually very neat. So here's an example. So I have a piece of data like an employee. An employee is an employee array. Here's an array of employees. Here's an initializer syntax where I have a new employee. Maybe the employee has several properties, the ID for the employee, the name of the employee, and how much they make. This is obviously wrong. And then what we can use is stream.of. And then once we use stream.of, we create a stream of employees called, we take the array of employees and convert it to a stream. So this is the build, the creation piece. Okay, going back up, we create the stream or build the stream itself. That's the first part. We can also do this by using an existing list. So for example, if I take a list of employees or an array list, I can take that that employee list and convert it, as an example. I can take the array of employees and convert arrays as list, and I can convert that. And then I can just simply say that employee list, as an example, .stream. Okay, so that's another way we can do it. So two ways of creating the stream itself. Remember, the stream itself is a bunch of data, okay, that I'm going to use. Okay, next. So that's one way. The other thing we can do is we can use stream of by itself with a bunch of free data. Think about individual objects, object 0, 1, 2, and so on. And then I can create the stream. So this is the stream part. So that's the third way of doing it. The fourth way of doing it is using something called a stream builder. And a stream builder would be the same kind of idea. We make a new stream builder of type employee, and then we use, we call it something like employee stream builder, and we make a new stream builder. And then basically what we do is we use the accept method, and we pass in the different pieces of the array of employees, and then we build our string that way. Once we've done that, once we have accepted, the accept method actually adds, it's almost like an add. We add different pieces of data, and then what we do is we use the build method to build the string. So again, going back up, here's where we do the build operation. That's the first step. All right, so once we've built the data, then it's easy for us to do an operation on it. For example, we can do a for each loop. So if we have an employee list.stream, we can do a for each loop. We can loop through each employee. And notice here we're using something called, or the lambda syntax that we had before, where we're going to return an employee, for every salary increment of 10. All right, so that's what it's going to be. Basically, it's going to return for each salary increment of 10, we're going to return another employee, which is pretty cool. All right, that's what it does. So one thing to note is for each, that's one of the first operations we can do. For each, so again, it loops over each of the stream elements, calling the supplied function, and this will be the function that we're going to give it for it to do something with it. So we can use a lambda. We can also call a named function. There's a lot of things that we can do here as an example. But it's a terminal operation, which means once we use a for each loop, we're done. We can't do anything else after that. Okay, going back up, the terminal operation is the last thing we do before the result. Okay, so first we build the stream, and then we do a bunch of stuff, and then we terminate it. Okay. The other one is a map function. Okay, so map, what it does is it produces a brand new stream after applying a function to each element of the original stream, and the new stream could be of a different type. So example, we say we have a list of employees, and we can say we make a stream of the employee IDs. So here are the employee IDs as an integer array, 1, 2, 3. And then what we're going to do is we're going to map, and notice that there is something called an employee repository find by ID. And employee repository is just a method for us to map our ID that we get, again, to the employee IDs that we pass in. That's what it does, okay? And we can use something called a collect method. These methods, notice what we're doing is we're just basically playing with the data, right? And we can collect that data and we can kind of convert it to a list. And that is what it's going to return. Okay, cool. Nice, nice. This is excellent. So collect then, which what we talked about is it's one of the common ways to get stuff out of the stream. Okay, so again, what we want to do is we want to say that, okay, so here's our list of employees, and we're going to say, in order for us to get this list, this is where it's going to be stored in here in the employees variable. We're going to take our employee list that we already have. We're going to convert it to a stream, collect the data, and we're going to use the toList method to convert it to a list and store it here in employees. So that's what the collect method does. Pretty simple. So collect is something that we use a lot when it comes to streams because we want to kind of gather the information and output it to something that makes sense. All right, here's filter. And this is what you could have done, again, with the previous, kind of our, for the exam that we did a midterm test and a bunch of other stuff. So you have a bunch of stuff. We want to convert it to a list. Remember, a lot of times, notice that everything is a list here that we're getting. Stream.of outputs into a list. So that's what employees. So employee IDs, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, we use some kind of map operation to map the IDs to and here you can see that there's an employee repository. An employee repository is a way of finding, to create key value pairs, with the employee IDs. We don't have this yet. But here's the great thing. Once we've mapped a list of employee IDs, here what we can do is we can say we can filter if the employee is not equal to null, cool, then pass, as long as the employee is not equal to null, so it exists, the employee number. Then we can take the employee number and get the salary from the employee, using the employee number, as long as it's greater than 200,000. And those two filters are going to be used and passed into the collect function, and we're going to convert that that new list to a list and store it into the employees. In fact, if anything, this employees variable should be called, employees making greater than 200,000, kind of thing, a special kind of employees. So that's what it does. It kind of wraps our data. That's what streams do. They wrap our data and allow us to do different operations. I'm introducing it here because we're going to use it later on, right? And we're not going to go too much further than this, but there's a lot of other things you can do with streams. So filtering is one thing. Find first. You can find the first, you want to do the same example, but you want to stop. You want to stop when you find the first, piece of data that matches the filter. Okay, here's an example of that. So, or else you return no. So that's what you do. If you don't find an employee that is greater than, let's say, $100,000, then we return no. Okay, that's kind of really cool way of doing things. That's find first. We can also convert our employee list as an example. We can make it into a stream and convert it to an array. Okay, and what it'll do is it'll make an empty employee array using the new operator. So basically, that's what this syntax means, and it'll store that inside of the employees array. So that's kind of a way of converting a list to an array. One thing to know about streams, just as a final thought, is that streams use something called lazy evaluations. So until the terminal operation is initiated, it doesn't actually do any computation at all. So it kind of goes through and chains all of the methods and then finally executes and does the computations at the end. Couple last things. We can also use comparison-based operations, and this is similar to using the compare to method. So notice that compare to is part of for example, employee 1. This is a lambda expression. We have employee 1 and employee 2, and we're using a comparator. This is a lambda that returns a comparator, right? So that way we can sort the list and return it inside of this employee's variable. That's what it does. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So you can use the sorted method as well. That's one way to do it. And then we can use min and max, for in the same way that we've seen before. And there's a couple ways to do that. We can use, kind of, again, the lambda expression that's here, or we can use, and this is what you were asking, Glenn, we can use the comparator, comparator class itself to compare based on a property. So we can specify the property we're comparing. In this case, we could have used magnitude for vector 2D. So that's kind of a way of using the comparator as well. So kind of a way of filtering and playing with data. That's what streams are, that allow us to compare things and return things like distinct, only distinct elements. So no duplicates. It'll return things that are not duplicated in any way. And there's also for the last one, they also allows you to match, all match, any match, or none match. And each of these things checks the predicate, and the predicate being the what you have in here, to see if anything matches this lambda expression. Okay, all matches that hit this lambda expression, save it in all even from this array list as an example. And anything that matches, one even, any match, the first one, right? And kind of none match, right? So, if none of them match, then store it here. And this is kind of a neat way of separating and segregating data. And that's why I'm showing it to you. And I've put it here for reference because we're going to use it in the future. Okay, that's it for me today. I think I've gone way over with what I wanted to do. Remember that for ICE 7, there's no lab report required. It's due this Sunday at midnight. and the stuff that we covered here inside of, what we did with IntelliJ today, which was opening a file dialog, saving a file dialog, and also making a custom comparator, or we overrode our compare to method inside of our vector2d. We've extended the functionality by allowing us to sort by magnitude. All this stuff is the stuff that's due for this Sunday at midnight. Okay, questions before we end for the day? All right, guys, that's it for me. I'm going to stop recording now, and I'll take any questions. And for those people who are having some issues, we'll talk about, I'll wait around for you. Otherwise, if you have no questions,